The end of the world is coming, and I feel sad when I see the ugly monsters outside. Let me think about which human baby's blood I want to drink today. The first human baby I picked up was furious at me. Didn't we agree that you can only drink my blood? Why do you want to drink other men's blood? Although I didn't understand what he was saying, I was shocked. So he likes to be sucked by me so much? Once since I can remember, the outside world has been full of things that are neither human nor ghost. I don't know them. I just think that those guys wandering outside are ugly and a little disgusting. Not only do they not take a bath and have no shame, they often snatch food from me. Fortunately, my fighting ability is very strong, and no one can snatch my food under my nose. 2. I went out to patrol the surroundings as usual that day. I heard a faint groan when I passed a collapsed ruin. I stopped and dragged out a man who looked seriously injured from a pile of rocks. No, he should not be called a complete man, because his legs were empty, and his whole body was stained with blood. Even when I roughly dragged him out, he just groaned and didn't respond. He looked very fragile. I saved a lot of such people after those monsters that were neither human nor ghost appeared. They were fine outside, but they mutated for some reason after being taken home. Some did not mutate, but they were sleeping and emitting a foul smell. I heard from humans that this state was death.it, brought a great shadow to my young mind. So I decided not to take the human home. Just as I stood up and prepared to leave, the man suddenly reached out and grabbed the corner of my clothes. His brows were furrowed, as if he was enduring great pain. I squatted down and looked at him carefully for a while. I looked at his slender white neck that was not completely covered by blood. After thinking about it, I decided to carry him home. If he unfortunately turned into a monster that was neither human nor ghost like the reserve food before, then I can only count it as my bad luck. 3. I put the man on the bed, thinking that he would at least groan. Unexpectedly, no sound came out. He was just like the reserve food I had before. I slowly moved in front of him and smelled his smell carefully. Little smelly. Then I pushed him, but there was no response. Although I didn't want to believe it, the human in front of me who I had carried back after going through so much hardship, he seemed to be dead. I looked at the man's white and slender neck, and saliva flowed out of my mouth involuntarily. I swallowed my saliva, I really couldn't bear it. Although the blood at this time was not as fresh as that of living humans, but it was bearable. Thinking of this, I opened the fangs at the corners of my mouth. When the fangs poked in, I could feel the man's blood flowing. It was so tender and juicy, a kind of blood I had never felt before. There was a smell of a strong man in his blood. I have to say that this blood was a bit tempting to me. After a while, I felt that the man seemed to move. I raised my eyes and met the man's open eyes, with a bit of cold and hostile eyes. I was so scared that I immediately pulled out my fangs and stepped back 3 feet. If I hadn't sensed and jumped away as soon as he woke up, I might have been attacked by the man in front of me. I looked at him in disbelief. I had clearly confirmed that he was in a dying state before sucking blood just now. How did he come back to life all of a sudden? I think it should be my first time sucking human blood, and I am not very skilled in the business. The man stretched out his hand to press the blood hole on his neck and struggled to get up. With a light flick of his hands, I was pressed tightly under a small mound of earth. But he still seemed very fragile. After pinching a small mound of earth, he continued to sit in the corner. The man's voice was cold. What do you want to do by catching me back? My blood is so popular with you. Don't worry, even if my blood is dried up, I will never leave it to you, the New Moon God Group. I was pressed under the small mound of earth and thought, so this man's name is Goyan. Goyan, this name is a bit familiar. Goyan, who wiped the blood off his face, seemed to be particularly familiar. I dragged the small mound of earth and crawled in front of Goyan. Before I could ask, do we know each other? Goyan subconsciously solidified his legs with mud and kicked me 5 meters away. I was like a turtle carrying a huge turtle shell on my back, and I couldn't turn over. 4. I fought with the small mound of earth for a long time by myself, and finally turned over. Then I continued to crawl towards Goyan. Do we know each other? It's rare to meet someone I feel familiar with after these monsters appear. I can't give up. Goyan still kicked me without hesitation. Even if you want to build a relationship, you should find a better reason. Just like that, I was kicked out by Goyan and crawled back. Over and over again, Goyan gradually became annoyed with me, and his tone became colder. Don't you understand what people say? I told you not to crawl over here again. At this time, Goyan's original broken finger also grew a finger. He can actually regenerate flesh and blood. Ordinary humans don't have this skill at all. So there is a great possibility that he and I know each other. Thinking of this, I excitedly hugged Goyan's thigh. Tell me. Goyan was silent for a while when he saw me like this. Where did you send you from? I even felt that he was a little disgusted with me at this moment. I propped up my arms in confusion. What do you mean by which side? I don't understand what you mean. Goyan looked at me with a strange look on his face. I don't know which side it is. Why did you bring me back? And this city has been an empty city for a long time. Apart from zombies, there have been no living people in this city for a long time. Why did you appear alone in this city with only zombies? Hearing this, I suddenly realized that it was no wonder that I had only seen him as a human for so long. I wanted to sit up, but the small mound behind me prevented me from standing up. I reached out and touched my head with difficulty. I don't know either. I have lived here since I can remember. This is my home. Goyan then followed my gaze and looked around. He frowned and looked for a long time before speaking carefully. This is a laboratory, and it is the largest laboratory in this city. Guo Yan frowned and uttered a few words. So you regard this laboratory as your home? Guo Yan stared at me for a long time before reaching out and removing the small mound behind me. 5. I wanted to continue asking Guo Yan, but Guo Yan stopped me with his hand. Don't ask me those meaningless questions. I pouted, feeling a little wronged. I walked silently to Guo Yan's side, and Guo Yan looked up at me. I moved him to the bed outside the laboratory in the distance. The moment I put him down, I saw Guo Yan's cheeks suddenly flushed. Then I saw Guo Yan's fair and slender neck and couldn't take my eyes off him. I could even hear the sound of blood flowing. In Guo Yan's body. I couldn't help swallowing. I was really greedy. Suddenly I thought of something, and I ran to the storage room to give Guo Yan the canned food I had brought back from the supermarket like humans. Guo Yan took the canned food and looked a little stunned. What is this? I said flatteringly, I'll give this to you to eat, can you let me eat it too? The canned food in Guo Yan's hand was immediately crushed, and his expression and temperament suddenly became terrifying. So you did so much, the purpose is still to get my blood. I was frightened by Guo Yan's change and was a little overwhelmed. The first time I took the initiative to friendly propose barter, I actually encountered Waterloo. Are you a little too much? I'm not eating you for nothing, I clearly said I'll give you food, and then can you let me suck blood? Isn't this fair? If you don't want to trade with me, then don't do it, then why are you so mean to me? I said all the words in my heart in one go. Then tears burst out of my eyes. Guo Yan was standing opposite me, but in just a few seconds, his whole body was soaked. Guo Yan was drenched and dazed, and he didn't have the anger and the desire to hit someone just now. Guo Yan, who was drenched in water, could only wipe his face again and again. What kind of mutant are you? Which human would shed so many tears? I sobbed, I don't know, as long as I feel wronged, I will cry. Guo Yan, who couldn't stop himself from being drenched, simply gave up. If you keep crying, this place will be flooded, and the laboratory will be overwhelmed by your crying. I can't stop. I heard Guo Yan sighed inaudibly. I may have owed you in my previous life. What can I do to make you stop? 6. A few minutes later, Guo Yan looked at me buried in his neck and sucked blood, and fell into deep thought. Guo Yan stretched out his hand to pull my head out of his neck. Okay, you're happy to have sucked blood, right? I licked the blood on the blood hole with reluctance. Suddenly, Guo Yan's whole body stiffened. When I left Guo Yan's arms, I saw that Guo Yan's earlobes were bright red. The bright red color like blood is particularly beautiful. Guo Yan seemed a little angry and rolled his eyes at me, but I didn't feel too much anger from him. You wouldn't just pounce on a human and suck his blood, would you? I shook my head quickly and gestured with my hands. No, you are the first human whose blood I sucked. Since I woke up, I have been wandering around this city. Most of the people I met were seriously injured. After I took them home, they all turned into monsters. Guo Yan looked at me as if he was thinking about something. After a long time, he replied, because everyone in this city has gone to the Blue Sky base, this is a dead city. Except for the very capable teams, basically no one dares to approach here. I suddenly realized that it was no wonder that I could only stay here with these monsters. No one came back. Why did I pick up Guo Yan in a ruin? Guo Yan obviously knew what I wanted to ask, and he lowered his eyebrows and replied, for some reasons, I will tell you later. Okay. 7. The sky gradually darkened, and I gradually became sleepy. I climbed onto the bed where Guo Yan was, and Guo Yan, who was resting with his eyes closed, subconsciously opened his eyes. His expression was a little panicked. What are you doing? I rubbed my sleepy eyes and pointed to the dark sky outside. It's night time to go to bed. Guo Yan seemed to find it difficult to understand. He said with difficulty, you know it's time to go to bed, but don't you know that men and women should not be intimate? What's more, we are not children now. I nodded in agreement with Guo Yan's words. So what? Guo Yan saw that I didn't understand what he meant, so he had to break the words apart and explain it to me clearly. He glanced at me, his earlobes reddened. You shouldn't sleep in the same bed with me. I always heard it clearly, but there was only one bed in the laboratory. I have always slept in this bed. Now I sleep with you. Is there a problem? It seems that there is no problem. Guo Yan silently closed his mouth that wanted to continue to explain to me. He used his supernatural power to condense 2 mud legs, limped off the bed, and then squatted in the corner. It looked a little pitiful. I squinted my eyes and thought while sleeping on the bed. Before I fell asleep, Guo Yan suddenly said, you are neither human nor zombie, but why do you need to sleep when your behavior is so human-like? I was very upset when someone disturbed my sleep. I grabbed something from the side and threw it at the source of the sound. You are so noisy. Guo Yan. It's more like a human. 8. When I was half asleep, I suddenly felt someone calling me in my ear. It was buzzing, very annoying. I slapped him directly. But not long after, I woke up when I felt the soft touch of a human. Through the moonlight, I saw Guo Yan standing by the bed with a dark face. There seemed to be a slap mark on his face. I rubbed my eyes and sat up. What's wrong with your face? Guo Yan just looked at me with an expression of what's wrong with my face. I recalled the crisp slap and took my hand back embarrassedly. Before I asked Guo Yan why he woke me up, Guo Yan covered my mouth, and suddenly there was a roar of an unknown creature outside the door. The sound was so loud that the zombies outside fled away, and the movements were so big that it seemed like the zombies were migrating. Guo Yan mouthed to me, do you know the Zombie King? Outside? Zombie King, what is that? It turns out that the neighbor who always comes to visit is called the Zombie King. It sounds very powerful. I shook my head at first, and Guo Yan looked at me and slowly released his hand covering my mouth. I don't know him, but he was always hanging around the door for a while, and then he didn't show up again after a long time. I thought he had left here. Go Yan wanted to cover my mouth but was a step slower. As soon as I finished speaking, the zombie king outside the door roared even louder than before, which scared me. Why is the neighbor outside so irritable today? I clearly walked out the door and greeted him before. Go Yan pulled me away from the door. However, the zombie king outside seemed to be more and more violent, hitting the door of the laboratory violently. It felt like the door of the laboratory would be scrapped in a few hits. Go Yan frowned and dragged me to leave. I struggled and said, "Where do you want to take me?" Go Yan's eyes sank slightly, and his voice was serious. "Didn't you see the zombie king outside? Once he comes in, both of us will die." I felt a little wronged, and neighbors usually wouldn't be like this. "I don't want to leave here, this is my home." Go Yan made me struggle so hard that I had to let me go first. At this moment, the door of the laboratory was kicked open by the zombie king, and Go Yan quickly pulled me behind him. Go Yan said with a heavy look in his eyes, "There is no zombie around with such a big noise. It is very likely that this is really the zombie king." The next moment, I smelled a smell that was not particularly good. To be honest, it was a bit intoxicating. Before I could react, Go Yan was lifted up by the zombie king with one hand. It was not until now that I saw the zombie king in full. Before he became a zombie, he should have been a man, huge in size, with long, grey nails on his hands. Even his fangs were much longer than those of ordinary zombies. Go Yan roared at me, his voice a little exasperated. "Why are you still standing here? Go away, we can't beat him with just the two of us." "No, I saved you, you are mine." Go Yan was stunned for a while after hearing this. I think if it wasn't for the wrong timing, he would have wanted to curse at me. "What time is it? You are still thinking about this? Get out of here." Just as Go Yan was talking, I was also picked up by the zombie king. Go Yan. I don't know why I didn't feel uncomfortable, but rather quite comfortable. I looked closer at the zombie king and found that he actually had a beard, and even his eyes were blue. I excitedly reached out and pulled the zombie king's beard, and Go Yan almost fainted watching from the side. I heard Go Yan holding back his emotions and saying, "Kai, Zhao Zhao. I told you not to provoke him." My first reaction was that Go Yan actually knew my real name. It's been a long time since anyone called me that. My second reaction was that the zombie king suddenly let go of his hand, and Go Yan and I fell to the ground. Then the zombie king's azure eyes turned towards me. I looked up and met his eyes, and I always felt that he seemed to have a lot to say to me. My tears immediately slid down, but this time they didn't burst out. Because I didn't feel wronged. I just felt uncomfortable. The zombie king took one last look at me, roared, and jumped away. Go Yan looked at the direction the zombie king left and fell into deep thought. He pulled me up and wiped my tears with his sleeve. "Why did you cry after looking at him? Did you sense some emotion?" I shook my head and turned my face away from Go Yan's sleeve, and said sullenly, "Your sleeves are so smelly." Go Yan. Go haven't showered for several days. Mudman Yan fell into silence. Later, when Go Yan was taking a shower, I was lying on the bed alone and thought. In fact, when I looked at the zombie king, I felt a very familiar smell from him. Very familiar, and a smell that would not bring me any harm. What exactly does he have to do with me? 10 the next morning, Go Yan was moving things around in the laboratory. "Are you leaving here to go to the human survivor base? I wish you a safe journey." After that, I lay on the bed and continued to sleep. Go Yan pulled me out of bed. "Not only me, you have to go with me." My sleepiness disappeared in a moment. "What do you mean I have to go too?" "I won't go. This is my home." Go Yan had an expression that said, "This matter is not negotiable. You don't know how dangerous it is here. Who can guarantee that the zombie king will not appear again after last night? If he appears, he will appear. I feel that the zombie king will not hurt me anyway." Although I objected to this, Go Yan still took me on the road. I was very angry because he tied me up with a quilt and took me away. I got out of the quilt, opened the door on one side and prepared to jump out of the car to go home. Go Yan, who was sitting in the driver's seat, was so scared that he stopped the car immediately. "Don't be impulsive." I ignored him and still wanted to pull the door handle. Go Yan looked at me for a while and took out a knife from somewhere to cut his arm. Bright red blood flowed out, and he said in a bewitching voice, "If you leave with me, you will have a long-term meal ticket, and you can eat whenever you want." I controlled myself not to look at Go Yan's wound and swallowed my saliva. I still had some ambition. "No, I want to go home." The next second, Go Yan rushed towards me, and my fangs pierced his lips the moment our lips touched. I subconsciously began to suck. In the end, I found that Go Yan's blood was flowing too fast, and I took the initiative to withdraw from Go Yan's arms. Go Yan's lips looked very strange because of the blood stains, and his eyes looked at me differently. To be honest, I was a little scared of Go Yan like this. I shrank back tremblingly. Go Yan looked at me straight and licked the blood on his lips. "Are you scared now? Wasn't it you who pressed me under you and wanted to eat me in your stomach just now?" I kept silent and chose to play dead. "You can't be too soft-hearted." Go Yan glanced at me for a while, then put his scratched arm in front of me. I didn't quite understand what Go Yan meant. Go Yan tutted, glanced at me, and said casually, "Snacks after dinner, other children have them, you also have them." Me. 11 I have no reason to run away anymore. After all, this long-term meal ticket is pretty good. For example, this time, while stopping to rest, I nudged Go Yan to indicate that it was time to eat. Go Yan glanced at me, and then went back to his work. "You really treat me like a buffet, 3 meals a day. If I'm not squeezed dry by you, I will be sucked dry by you." Me. "It was you who said that other children have it, and I have it too. You don't keep your word." You're lying. You didn't say that before you tricked me onto the road. You can say whatever you want, I said indignantly. Gu Yan turned his head and glanced at me. Then I didn't know you were so good at eating before. You are making false propaganda, suspected of fraud. Gu Yan glanced at me and said, then call the police to arrest me. I used my actions to condemn Gu Yan's behavior. Draw a circle and curse you. 12. Just when Gu Yan and I were arguing, a voice suddenly came from the bushes in the distance. Gu Yan teleported to my side in an instant, bringing with him a gust of wind. Gu Yan pulled me behind him again, and I silently made a ghost eye behind Gu Yan. In terms of strength alone, I think I am not worse than Gu Yan. I can kill several zombies with one punch. And the zombies seem to be a little afraid of me, and generally won't bump into me. Gu Yan and I stared at the bushes, and soon a ragged middle-aged man crawled out of the bushes. The middle-aged man's expression flashed with hope when he saw Gu Yan. There are zombies behind, save me. Gu Yan told me to stay here well, and told me with his eyes to be careful of the middle-aged man. I nodded and let him go without worry. In fact, he was worried unnecessarily. I was very smart in many things. I sat not far from the middle-aged man. I could smell a mixture of blood coming out of him. It gave me a very dirty feeling. I frowned secretly, thinking that this middle-aged man must be not tasty. Not long after, Gu Yan killed the zombies. When he came back, he also caught a wild rabbit. Gu Yan seemed a little surprised to see me and the middle-aged man getting along harmoniously. Gu Yan peeled the wild rabbit and grilled it, and gave me a rabbit leg. I pouted to show that I didn't want to eat it, and Gu Yan warned me with his eyes, you have to hold it in your hand even if you pretend. I pouted, and felt that Gu Yan was not cute at all. I want to draw a circle and curse him. 1-3 When squatting aside to curse Gu Yan, I heard them talking. It turned out that the middle-aged man was called Dr. Chen. He looked very young but was actually quite old. He has been studying the zombie virus since the zombies appeared. This time, the team leader and I came out to study the zombie king, hoping to find a way to crack the zombie virus from the zombie king. I pricked up my ears when I heard this. What does this have to do with my neighbor? I ran to Dr. Chen and said, but he won't hurt anyone. I've been neighbors with him for a long time and I've never seen him hurt humans, but I've seen him beat zombies. Gu Yan didn't have time to cover my mouth, so I had to close my eyes helplessly. Dr. Chen was surprised and said, you are a human being, but you have been neighbors with the zombie king for a long time. Little girl, are you sure you are not kidding? Gu Yan stood up and blocked me. At the moment we passed each other, Gu Yan bared his teeth and gave me a look. Dr. Chen, we have seen a very powerful zombie in Chengcheng, the dead city. Her fingernails are very long. Dr. Chen stood up excitedly. Yes, he has very long nails. Gu Yan gently pressed Dr. Chen. Yes, her red nails are long and sharp, and almost cut off my and my girlfriend's heads. Dr. Chen was dumbfounded after hearing this. You mean red nails? That's a female zombie. Gu Yan pretended to be surprised and said, my girlfriend and I encountered a female zombie. Is there a male zombie that is so powerful? Then, do we humans still have a way to survive? I silently listened to Gu Yan's serious nonsense behind him. While Dr. Chen was talking to himself, Gu Yan pulled me aside. The zombie king did not hurt us, but it does not mean that he will not hurt humans. We don't know Dr. Chen's background now, so it's better to be cautious. I nodded to show that I understood. 1-4 Gu Yan gave Dr. Chen a set of clothes and prepared some supplies for him. We are not going the same way as the doctor, so let's separate here. Dr. Chen hesitated with the supplies. Where are you going? I am a person without superpowers and can only wait to die when I meet those zombies. It is better to go with you to find my partner. Gu Yan refused without a trace. To be honest, my girlfriend and I are going to find our family. We don't have a definite destination, and you are responsible for the fate of reviving mankind. I really dare not delay you. Dr. Chen looked at the supplies in his hand, then looked at the road in the distance, and said, little brother, let me follow you. I will leave immediately after finding my partner. Seeing Dr. Chen like this, Gu Yan had to agree first. Because of the wind and rain and the appearance of Dr. Chen in the past few days, I haven't drunk Gu Yan's blood for a long time. I was so hungry that I almost fainted. Seeing Dr. Chen leave, I pulled Gu Yan's sleeve pitifully, and Gu Yan glanced at me, slowly pulled down the collar and tilted his head to the side. I rushed over excitedly and buried my whole body in Gu Yan's arms. Gu Yan put his arms around my waist and let me bury my head in his neck. What do you want to eat for lunch? Dr. Chen pulled open the curtain and his voice suddenly became quiet. Sorry, I disturbed you. Then there was the sound of the curtain being pulled back. I raised my head and was a little confused. What happened? Gu Yan didn't even lift his eyelids, put his hand on my head and pressed my head back. It's okay, you eat yours. I drank it with satisfaction, and I subconsciously licked it a few times when I saw the blood oozing out. After licking it, I found that Gu Yan didn't seem to like me licking him. I retracted my tongue in embarrassment. I won't do it next time. Unexpectedly, Gu Yan looked at me for a long time before slowly speaking, do it if you want. Gu Yan seemed a little strange today. I always felt that he was a little different from before. After pulling open the curtain and coming out, Dr. Chen looked at me and Gu Yan with a strange look. He looked back and forth between me and Gu Yan. I wanted to ask what this was. Gu Yan directly pulled me into his arms. Don't worry about him. 15 The next day, Gu Yan was stopping the car to refuel. Suddenly, a zombie rushed out of the gas station. Go Yan quickly knocked the zombie down, but the next moment the zombie that was originally lying on the ground suddenly jumped in front of Dr. Chen. My body subconsciously rushed to Dr. Chen, accompanied by Go Yan's panicked cry, Kai Jiao Jiao. The zombie in front of me fell down, and my arm was successfully scratched by the zombie. I really wanted to raise my hand to comfort Go Yan and tell him that the zombie virus was useless to me. But Go Yan came over and grabbed my hand. Dr. Chen rolled away from me, his voice trembling, panic flashing across his face. She has been bitten by a zombie. We must kill her immediately. Go Yan looked at Dr. Chen with cold eyes. My girlfriend was scratched by a zombie just now because of you, and you are the least qualified person to say this. After that, Go Yan turned his head and looked at me. If you want to leave, I won't force you, but I just hope you will never appear in front of me and my girlfriend again. Dr. Chen was furious. Are you stupid? She is no longer a normal human being after being bitten. She will become a zombie. If you don't kill her now, she will turn around and endanger us humans when she becomes a zombie. Go Yan protected me behind him and said to Dr. Chen word by word, seriously, she is not a zombie, she is my girlfriend. I will tell you again, I will never leave her. As for you, no matter how far you want to go, it has nothing to do with us. Finally, Dr. Chen looked deeply at me and Go Yan and left. After Dr. Chen left, I tugged at Go Yan's sleeve, a little puzzled. Why didn't you tell him that I was bitten by a zombie and it was okay? Go Yan's eyes were heavy, and there was an emotion in his eyes that I didn't understand. He touched my head and said in a low and soft voice, Jiao Jiao, you must remember that you can't tell anyone that you will not become a zombie after being bitten by a zombie. I really want to ask why, but I know that Go Yan won't tell me with my little head. 16 After refueling, Go Yan and I left the gas station. Go Yan wanted to keep watch outside the car at night, and I grabbed Go Yan, who wanted to open the car door. If you are with me, no zombies will attack you actively, so you don't need to go out. Go Yan nodded my head, and what you just said, you must never tell others. Why can't I tell others so many things? Is it because I have it and others don't? I thought I had figured out the reason, and nodded obediently, so that's it, I'll try not to say it, so they won't be jealous. Go Yan glanced at me and didn't refute. I was half asleep when I suddenly smelled a smell. I frowned, and fell asleep again. In the depths of consciousness. When I woke up again, I found myself in a shaky car. I carefully looked around and the decoration inside the car, and confirmed that it was Go Yan's car. But there was no sign of Go Yan in the car. And sitting in the driver's seat was Dr. Chen, who had already left. My head was a little confused, and I wanted to struggle to get up but found that I was tied up. Hearing the sound, Dr. Chen turned his head, looked at me and took out a syringe from his pocket. You are really extraordinary. The anesthesia I gave you can last until the laboratory, but you woke up on the way. Now I can only give you another injection. The cold medicine was injected into my body and I lost consciousness again. 17 After Dr. Chen took me to the laboratory, I woke up soon. At this time, I was in a huge glass cover with many exquisite instruments. There were even many laboratory instruments that I had never seen before but looked terrible. I knocked on the glass. Why did you bring me here? Where is Go Yan? Where did you take him? Dr. Chen wore glasses and said in an orderly manner, I heard from Go Yan that your name is Kai Jiao Jiao. Right. He walked to the glass cover. It has been 36 hours since you were scratched by the zombies. The amazing thing is that you have no signs of turning into a zombie. Maybe you have something to unlock the zombie virus. For the sake of all mankind, I think I can only sacrifice you. You will also sacrifice yourself for all mankind, Kai Jiao Jiao. Dr. Chen looked at me with an unclear smile, and finally moved the button, and the glass cover released a gas. Under Dr. Chen's gaze, I fell asleep again. 18 While I was sleeping, I dreamed about the laboratory that I thought was my home. That laboratory was the same as this one, but a little smaller. However, even the instruments were just as sophisticated. Could it be that I was really hiding some secret? And the zombie king that Dr. Chen was looking for, my neighbor, everything seemed to be connected by a thread in the power. Dr. Chen put me on a bed with sophisticated instruments, with a clear consciousness but no strength in my body. I watched Dr. Chen and his assistant insert the needle into my body, and bags of bright red blood flowed out of my body. I looked at Dr. Chen and suddenly felt that he was a little strange, so strange that it made me feel a little scary. I opened my mouth but couldn't make a sound. I really wanted to ask if this is what you want. Dr. Chen, who noticed my strangeness, approached me quietly and whispered, Kai Jiao Jiao, I should have thought of it earlier. You are the daughter of that person. Don't blame me, blame the person who gave birth to you. Who is the daughter of that person? Don't act like you know me well, who do you think you are? The cold potion reminded me of something in a trance. Fragments of memory kept flashing through my mind. The person in the laboratory wearing a white robe and glasses. And the zombies trapped in the glass cover who were unable to struggle. And Go Yan, lying in another glass cover. No, why is Go Yan lying in the glass cover? Before I could figure it out, Dr. Chen injected me with another potion, and my consciousness blurred again. 19 On the third day of sleeping in the glass cover, Go Yan found this place. I don't know how he got in by bypassing the various mechanisms outside. But looking at his unshaven beard and tired face, it seems that he has not been living well these days. Go Yan walked to the glass cover and put his hand on mine. Jiao Jiao, I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. I nodded. It was indeed a bit long. If I had come later, I might have been gone. Go Yan glanced around, with obvious disgust in his eyes. He clenched his fists. Before I could say a word to Go Yan, the lights behind me suddenly lit up. Go Yan, I knew you would come. I thought that your girlfriend was a big surprise, but you are the one who surprised me the most. The ability of blood regeneration is really coveted. You should have run far away from where you were originally imprisoned and not appeared in front of me again, but now you have taken the initiative to fall into my trap, so don't blame me for being rude. Guo Yan's expression did not change, looking at Dr. Chen as if he was looking at something disgusting. You call yourself a doctor, but what you do is really for humanity. You are just for your own selfishness. Because of you, tens of thousands of humans were forced to voluntarily join the experiment, and they died on the test bench before they even got off. You are not the savior who saves all mankind, you are the executioner who forces mankind into despair. After listening to this, Dr. Chen even clapped his hands with interest, with an expression of even so, what can you do to me on his face? Guo Yan, you already know everything. When you first saved my life, I really didn't expect that we would end up like this. Dr. Chen lowered his head and wiped his glasses. In that case, you and your girlfriend should stay here forever. After listening to the whole story, I frowned. Why do you talk so much nonsense before you start? Isn't this just a waste of time? It's like two young sons of a landlord quarreling. But at this moment, Dr. Chen, grinning, looks like a villain. A few seconds passed, or even a minute passed. Behind Dr. Chen, except for his assistant, there was no one or anything else. Dr. Chen began to panic. What's going on? Where are the people behind? He said as he stepped back. Guo Yan didn't seem to bother to pay attention to Dr. Chen and walked to the main control console. I pressed a button to open the glass cover for me. Guo Yan used soil to form a wall, and then Guo Yan pulled me to the door. 20 while being dragged by Guo Yan, I said, I don't think we are being domineering at all. Guo Yan turned around and looked at me unhappily. What's more important, domineering or life? We are running for our lives now. I had no choice but to accept Guo Yan's answer. I thought I could escape, but in the end I found Dr. Chen standing at the door waiting for me and Guo Yan. Me. Guo Yan. I couldn't help but ask a soul-searching question. Is the wall you just built just for show? Why is it so useless? Guo Yan glanced at me. They have hot weapons in their hands. What is my wall? Not to mention the wall, it's useless even if a tank comes. I looked at Dr. Chen. You are cheating. Dr. Chen didn't care about me at all. You two just let me do the experiment. I will definitely be able to research a way to crack the zombie virus and break through the human limit of flesh and blood regeneration. Do you two understand that this is a major event for the benefit of mankind? Can you sacrifice your small family, benefiting everyone? Are you still part of the human race? Looking at Dr. Chen, who had fallen into madness, Guo Yan couldn't help but said, Zhao Zhao and I are not unwilling to contribute to humanity, but for humanity we have to sacrifice ourselves. What's the reason? With such ability, you can't even protect yourself, but you still want to protect all mankind. Dr. Chen pointed his hot weapon at me and Guo Yan. No matter what you two think, you have to stay now, whether you stay or not. I noticed that Guo Yan's temperament changed, and he really wanted to kill Dr. Chen. I was also eager to help Guo Yan defeat the villain Dr. Chen. Guo Yan held me, and I knew he wanted to carry me behind him again like before. At the moment when the wind and clouds were surging, I thought casualties were inevitable. After opening my eyes, I found that Dr. Chen had been knocked down. But in the same way, Guo Yan was also suppressed by Dr. Chen. The two of them reached a weird balance. If there must be a winner, then both sides will be hurt. Let's make a bold guess, even 1 for 1, both of them will be taken away. 2-1, just when I thought one of them would die today. Suddenly, a voice came. From a distance. It seemed that a huge monster was approaching here. Dr. Chen's face turned visibly pale. I took advantage of Dr. Chen's trance and ran to Guo Yan's side to pull him away. Guo Yan looked at the distant direction with deep eyes. Before his breath swept over, Guo Yan pressed me into his arms. I finally struggled to get out of Guo Yan's arms. I saw the huge monster that appeared 2 or 3 meters away, which was my neighbor. Dr. Chen was frightened and accidentally fell to the ground. Looking at my neighbor, the zombie king they called, trembling, Master, Senior Brother. I looked at the zombie king and Dr. Chen in shock. What? The zombie king turned out to be Dr. Chen Senior. Guo Yan and I looked at each other. Dr. Chen's previous attempt to capture the zombie king was premeditated. I always felt that the zombie king stared at me for a long time. That look was like looking at his own naughty, innocent and naive child. I was a little scared by his stare, and I quietly hid behind Guo Yan. Dr. Chen seemed to be afraid. Senior, I was wrong, I shouldn't have done that to you. The zombie king looked at Dr. Chen with a threatening look in his eyes, and Dr. Chen was frightened and trembled all over. He immediately changed his words and said, I shouldn't attack innocent people. Senior, please let me go. I thought about the humans who were imprisoned and bound by Dr. Chen. They didn't do anything wrong. But they were exploited by Dr. Chen, who called it a contribution to all mankind. In fact, the moment they entered the laboratory, their lives were no longer in their own hands. I walked up to Dr. Chen and said, you are lying. You don't care about the lives of those people at all. Even if I let you go this time, you won't stop. With the zombie king here to support me and Guo Yan, I am naturally not afraid of Dr. Chen's tricks. Sure enough, Dr. Chen looked at me tremblingly, with begging in his eyes. The zombie king seemed to look in my direction, then grabbed Dr. Chen's collar and jumped away. From a distance, I could still hear Dr. Chen's pig-killing shouts. 2-2 after that, Guo Yan, I and the people who stayed in the laboratory released all the innocent victims imprisoned by Dr. Chen. On the 3rd day after that, Dr. Chen came back. The zombie king came back with Dr. Chen. The zombie king looked at me with a much clearer look than before. He looked more like a human than a zombie. Gu Yan looked between the zombie king and me again and again, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. I tugged at Gu Yan's sleeve. Are you hiding something from me? Gu Yan looked down at me, as if there were thousands of words in his eyes to tell me. I shuddered. I had watched soap operas before the end of the world. In soap operas, the male and female protagonists all had such eyes when they were about to part and die or were deeply in love. I stared at Gu Yan with wide eyes. Gu Yan, are you sick? Or is something big about to happen? Gu Yan looked at me with a look that was hard to describe, and helplessly held his forehead. How is your brain circuit? What do you mean by how it is? I am a normal person. I muttered. Then why are you looking at me with that look? It's weird. Gu Yan took a breath and was about to speak. The zombie king, who had been standing aside for a long time, looked at me steadily, and finally touched my head lovingly. He didn't say anything, but I could still feel that he seemed very reluctant. 2-3 After being supervised and controlled by the zombie king for a month, Dr. Chen developed a vaccine that can crack the zombie virus. This alarmed the top leaders of the survivor bases. Soon, the results of the experiment came out, and the zombie virus was successfully cracked. While people all over the world were celebrating joy, I felt a sense of panic from the bottom of my heart for no reason. It seemed that something had completely disappeared from my life. Seeing this, Gu Yan wanted to take me to find Dr. Chen. Unexpectedly, I heard the news that Dr. Chen committed suicide in his house. When Gu Yan and I arrived at the scene, it was too late. Dr. Chen lay on the bed with a pale face, and he was holding a notebook in his hand. My intuition told me that there must be something recorded in it. After Dr. Chen's funeral was handled, Gu Yan took the notebook and his face changed when he saw it for the first time. Gu Yan was silent for a long time before speaking. This notebook is not Dr. Chen's. If it's not Dr. Chen's, who else could it be? Then Gu Yan said solemnly, this notebook belongs to your father. My first reaction was, father, when did I have a father? My head suddenly felt dull and painful. Gu Yan pressed me into his arms. Zhao Zhao, the zombie king is your father. I heard Gu Yan say in my ear while I was drowsy. Originally, my father and Dr. Chen were both studying new viruses under the same tutelage. However, Dr. Chen was very concerned about the zombie virus, even to the point of disregarding ethics. My father was very dissatisfied with Dr. Chen's crazy behavior, so he reported it to the top management. Afterwards, Dr. Chen hated my father, so he injected the zombie virus into my father and me. But my father only had one sample serum, and it was not guaranteed to be useful. In desperation, my father could only inject it into me. Afterwards, the zombie virus broke out in the laboratory, and my father became the zombie king because of the zombie virus he was injected with. Sometimes he was awake and sometimes he was corrupted, and he would only wake up briefly when he smelled my breath. At the end of the notebook, my father was full of guilt towards me. So he chose to sacrifice himself and let himself be studied thousands of times. Then, he left with Dr. Chen. 24 Knowing everything, tears fell unconsciously. I asked unconsciously, Gu Yan, why did he give me the only zombie vaccine? Why not give it to himself, so that he would not become a zombie? Gu Yan held my head and pressed against my nose seriously. Because he loves you, he is a great father. My tears flowed uncontrollably, but I am not a dutiful daughter. I don't even think of him. Gu Yan held me in his arms and comforted me softly. No, he will always be in our hearts. In the second year after the zombie vaccine was developed, humans began to rebuild their homes. The people who had died forever because of the appearance of zombies also returned to their hometowns. And I also recovered my memory, inherited my father's mantle and became a scholar studying various viruses. This world is the world that my father chose to sacrifice himself to protect. So I have to protect this world on behalf of my father. Gu Yan fully agreed and encouraged me. You protect the world, and I protect you. Do whatever you want, and I will always be behind you. My father, do you see it? My home is gradually returning to its original state and becoming better.